Now that we have our image planes set up and our pre-production taken care of, let's begin blocking out the rough model of our Mustang and start to gradually prepare ourselves for adding in detail. So the first thing I'll do is create a box, and I'm going to create this in the very center of my scene. I'll turn on snapping, right click and make sure that grid points is turned on, and position this at the center of my scene and click and drag, and I'll hold down Control so that this gets created evenly, and then drag up, and I've got my cube to get started with. I'll turn off snapping there. At this point I can look in all my views and I'll notice that my front, my cube is just essentially blocking all of my viewport, all of my image planes. So I'll just do Alt-X to make that semi-transparent. And then you'll notice that this front image plane is in front of the cube, so I'll just move that behind. And now you can see that my box is ready to be modeled in all 4 views. Now, if I think about this, I want to give myself a starting point with the amount of detail that I have on the model. So let's look at the properties of this under the Modifier tab. And I'll increase the width segments maybe to 3. That'll give me a starting point, so I can start to shape the car in this direction. And I'm also going to give myself length divisions to 2, so that I have a line that moves down the center of the model. Now this is important because a car is essentially symmetrical, so we do one side and we want the other side to look the same. And if we do this manually, if we model each side independently, it's going to take a very long time to do this. And we can save ourselves a lot of time and headache by actually making the one side mirror the other. So we only have to model half of the vehicle. Now the easiest way to do this is to actually convert this down to an editable poly so that we're ready to work on it. I'm actually going to go to polygon selection mode, select half of the shape and just delete it out. At this point I've got a hollow shape, and I'm going to come back out of sub-object mode, and I can apply a symmetry modifier. So I'll come down here to the S's and apply symmetry. Now you might think, well, this hasn't worked, but if you look closer you'll notice that by default we're actually mirroring along the x-axis, which is the wrong direction. We want to mirror along the y-axis, so we'll change the properties to y. And you might panic and think, well, everything's lost. But the truth is this is happening because we have an option selected here which is slice along mirror. And we already halved our object and removed the opposite half. So if we deselect slice along mirror, everything will come back. This is designed for if you have a whole object and you want it to be divided. We can now look at the threshold option and figure out exactly how this works. So say we were about to start editing this. If we come down to the Edit Poly modifier, by default your symmetry is going to disappear. And that's because we're looking at the lower modifier in the stack. So we want to be able to see the symmetry modifier and edit it at the same time. We need to turn on the Show End Result. And now we can see the symmetry modifier in action, but we're still editing the Edit Poly modifier. So let's go into Vertex Selection mode, and I'm going to grab one of these vertices here and move this out just a little bit. We've created a hole in our model, and we come back to the Symmetry modifier. Let's look at what this threshold does. If you increase the threshold, as you get higher and higher, it suddenly snaps into place. So this threshold value is almost like how magnetic the vertices are. The higher the value, the more magnetic they are. So as you start to bring them closer, they'll snap, which is very useful if you want to keep a tight seam down the middle of the model. By default, I set this value to about 1. You don't want it too high because otherwise it'll snap everything once you start adding in detail, which is bad. So let's bring these closer together. There we go, they're snapping nicely there. And we're essentially ready to begin modeling this now. The first thing we want to do then is start to grab these vertices and align them as best we can with this limited amount of detail to all of our blueprints. So as I do this, I'm going to drag regions around my vertices here and bring them down. You'll notice that I'm not just going to click, because that's only going to pick up the foreground vertex, and it's going to divide the model up in rather a bad fashion. You'll notice, though, incidentally, that the symmetry modifier is working well, and that what we do to one side is happening on the other. We can only work on the original side, though. We can't work on this symmetrical side. So let me undo this. And what I'm going to do is start to line these up with key points on my blueprint. So maybe to the top of the vehicle there, top of the vehicle there, down to the back, and then the lower portion there, maybe to here, corner of that wheel well, and then to the back of the vehicle. Now as I do this, I want to be sure that every time I move a vertex, I'm aligning it in all of my views to all of the image planes. So right now, you can see that we've got an issue that I've only aligned them in this view. So I can start aligning them in the rest of my views as well. So we'll bring these down here. And you want to make sure that where a vertex aligns in one view, it matches up in another view. So if I think about it, I'm really aligning, let's see, this vertex here, this outer vertex. In the side view, I might decide to bring this down a bit and align it to where the windshield here meets the frame of the vehicle here. And in my top view, I want to make sure that that aligns also. So I'll bring this in and down a bit. And you can see that, again, that aligns in both views. And we can come to the front view and again verify that those line up. We want to do this with each of our vertices. So let's grab this rear vertex here, bring it down, and I'll align it roughly to where the windshield intersects, again with that line that travels down the vehicle. Come to the top view and pull that in. This is the biggest step, the most important step you want to undertake when you're first starting out, is to actually make sure that you're correctly aligning these vertices in all of your views. So let's look at how this line comes down the vehicle to this far left-hand corner. And we can see that right now it's aligning with the far rear of the vehicle. This is actually where the vehicle comes out, and this is the center. So we should really bring this in, and let's align it to, just to begin with, to this corner here, and then make sure that it aligns to the same corner in this view, which would be here. Now as I'm switching viewports, you'll notice that you might pick up a vertex in this viewport and notice the direction of your axes, and they're different in this viewport. So when you try and pick up one of these axes in this viewport, it suddenly snaps to a different set of axes, and then you've lost that selection. Now this is because we're currently running in the view coordinate system, so it's updating it to each view that you click into. So to stop that from happening and to keep yourself sane, we'll set this to world, and then all of our axes perfectly align in all the views, and you don't get that incorrect switching as you change views. That's going to make your life a lot easier. Let's look at this rear corner here. And maybe bring this to here. And bring this vertex here out and up, roughly to align with where this bumper juts out. So we got that nice shape on the rear. We'll look at this vertex here. Make sure that that corner point there aligns in our other views, and we can't really see the lower portion of the side of the car from this top view. In fact, we can't really see behind the wheel well in this view either. And we can verify by moving this behind the rear view. Again, we can't really see what's happening behind these wheel wells. So until we start looking at our reference imagery, a lot of this is just down to guesswork. So I'm going to approximate roughly where I think this should appear in my top view. So this is the widest point of the vehicle. I'm going to bring this in to about here. I think that would be roughly there, and the same with this one. I think that's about right. As I move to the corner of the vehicle here, I can grab this and probably bring this back to here. So you can see that this section here is really where it starts to curve around in the top view. Let's take a look at this one. This is our top section. Again, this needs to come back. And I might actually start to bring this down to a point here where this curve here intersects with the front grille above that light. I can verify this in the front view. Let's bring our front view back into play here. Let's bring that forward. Grab that same vertex we had before. And you can see that it needs to come in. So it needs to align there, where this line comes down and meets the front grille. So we're aligning in all the views. So it's a question of doing this with all of your initial vertices to make sure that everything lines up. You want to try and get as much done with as little as possible. So we only have a few vertices, but we can really start to define the shape of the vehicle at this point. Now once we've done this, we can start to add in some detail using cuts. So what I think I'll do is I'll add in where the windshield here meets the hood, this point here, by cutting down. So I'll grab these faces here and I'll switch to my quick slice tool. Click here for the starting position. You can see it interactively cuts the selected polygons. I'll click here to finish and right click. Back to vertex mode. And now I've got more detail to play with. So let's bring these down to that wheel well there. Let's try and check them in this view. I would say roughly there. And let's bring this vertex here so that it continues this line here. Now this is really important. We want to think heavily about edge flow and where points intersect. So all of your vertices should remain on the same edge flow. So these lines should continue and naturally flow around the vehicle. If you start crossing over, so from this outside line, if you start crossing to the inside line, then you're going to cause problems later on when you start to add in more detail. So let's verify this vertex point here in the top view. You can see this outer line here needs to line up with this outer line roughly here. And it depends how good your blueprints are. Sometimes everything doesn't line up perfectly, even though your scale is correct. Let's bring this to roughly here, where they intersect. That's roughly correct. So we define some more detail there, we've got that shape better. Let's do the same for the rear. Grab these polygons here. Quick slice tool from here to here. Right click to cancel. And then align these vertices. Let's start by bringing this to the corner wheel well here. It's quite likely that I'm going to change my mind later. Now we can effectively see that corner wheel well in the rear view. So we'll change our image planes. We'll move this one behind the rear view so we can see that. Look at this corner wheel well, and we could see that it should line up right there, where the wheel well comes in and joins with the rest of the body. Let's bring that front view back so we can use that again. And start to work on the rest of these. So where should this one go? At this point, I'm going to continue this line that comes down the back of the vehicle, and I'll bring this probably to here where they intersect this line and this line, the corner of that window. So bearing that in mind, you can see that, oh, actually by default that perfectly lines up into the corner of that window. Let's check this one here and bring this down. The widest point is the center of the vehicle here. Let's bring this up here. Let's get this edge here lining up with the blueprint edge there. And also in this view, you can see that edge lines up with the blueprint there. So we're trying to get everything to match up. So at this point, the vehicle is getting close, but I think there's still a little bit more refining we can do before we start to actually add in some detail into the model. And by that I mean the shape as we look down the vehicle. You can see that the widest point of the vehicle is not really being calculated at this point, so we need to add in some more detail. I've done as much as I can with this limited detail. I'm just checking things here. I need to add in some divisions along the vehicle here. So what I think I'll do is move to my side view, grab all these polys, and again perform a quick slice from here to here. Right click. And we want to be cautious to use all of this detail that we've just created. So let's consider the widest point of the vehicle, which is really here. It's actually just below the car handle, the door handle there. But as a reference, I think I'm going to start by using that door handle because that line moves nicely down the car in all my views. You can see it here as well. And actually appears to almost match up with the widest point. So let's use that. So I'll probably grab this point here and move this up to where it intersects with the wheel well here, and then come to my top view and get that correct width. So the intersect is about here. It's not the outer part, it's the inner part. And we could verify that on the rear view, but I'm comfortable that that's correct. Let's do this next point here. We'll bring this up to here. So we've got that line moving down the vehicle, and we'll check it again in this top view. It needs to come out to here, the widest point. So I just keep moving down the vehicle doing this. This point I think I could take to here, but I think I'm going to take it to here, and later on add in some more detail here when I start working on the wheel wells. So let's check this intersection point here, and bring it out to here. And then here, we'll follow that line all the way down, making sure we're maintaining some good edge flow. Look at that intersection point there. And try and match up here as best we can. Look in the front view, you can see I'm starting to form the shape of that front grille now. And this is slightly off, so let's move that back a little bit. These blueprints are quite low resolution, so we're just going to have to do the best we can until we start looking at our reference imagery. Let's check this point here and this point here. So I could bring these down, but I think I'm going to continue that line, that flow through the entire vehicle. So I'll bring these up to here. Probably bring this one back to where it intersects there. And let's check these in the top view. So I'll bring these out to the widest point and bring this one into the widest point. So we're following the flow of the vehicle. At this point, I think I'm going to stop there on this video, and in the next video we'll start to continue to refine this. So remember, make as much of the model match up with the blueprints as you can, even with a limited amount of detail. Everything should correlate to something on the blueprints, and it should match in all views, and that's going to be the best way to get started. So we'll continue now in the next video, adding in more detail.